Yes, and you can be put in a quarantine, which is more or less a prison. So the punishments are extremely harsh if you refuse the vaccine, at least in the US and Switzerland and probably here in Austria as well. And another point is that the US government has abolished liability for the vaccine companies. So whatever they do, whatever damage they cause, they will not have to pay any compensation. And this reinforces fears that the people are being exposed to a reckless experiment with a dangerous vaccine material. The government knows it, the drug companies knows it, and that's why they've got themselves out of the immunity or the liability clause on time.
So they've protected themselves legally, so they could kill millions of people and nobody could sue them. I mean, like in the days, for instance, of thalidomide, when eventually distillers, the company that made it, were forced to make payments to the families whose children were born deformed. That couldn't happen with this vaccine because they've got immunity. Is that right?
That's correct, and that's the difference between 1976, when the US government also had a mass vaccination campaign against swine flu, but which was also abandoned because so many people got ill or died as a result. At that time, however, the vaccine companies were still obliged to pay compensation. I think the Health or the US Health Secretary signed a decree allowing the vaccine companies to immunity just a few months ago or weeks ago. So what incentive do they have to, provide safe vaccines? One other point is that the Czech Republic has just suspended its contract with Baxter because Baxter refused or couldn't guarantee the safety of the vaccines in the Czech Republic. Now, if it was just about money, if they're really just in there for the money and they just want to provide safe vaccinations and have huge contracts, you'd think they would have been able to guarantee to the Czech Republic that it would be safe just to get that contract, just to be able to deliver those vaccines. But they couldn't, and so the Czech Republic is now looking at supplies from Novartis and GSK. And
are they involved, do you think, with this?
Absolutely, they most definitely are involved. They also have the same disastrous combination of ingredients, and GSK and Novartis's vaccines are actually classified as bioweapons according to the EU regulators and the US regulators.
Okay, I think it's important that I state here that obviously this is your opinion and, not endorsed by this station. And also, if Novartis and Baxter want to come to this show and write a reply, then I'm sure we'll consider it. But having said all that, please carry on, Jane.
Well, absolutely right. One other incident involving Novartis were bird flu trials of candidate vaccine last year in Poland, which resulted in the deaths of at least 21 people and hundreds of people being injured. And doctors and nurses who administered Novartis's vaccine are on trial. But the company that produced these vaccines has so far got off the hook. They haven't been called to account for producing these lethal candidate vaccines.
I've printed out a cutting, actually, funnily enough, from the Telegraph again. It's not the only paper I read, I assure you. But the headline, this is in the Telegraph, dated the 2nd of July last year, and it says, homeless people die after bird flu vaccine trial in Poland. 3 Polish doctors and 6 nurses are facing criminal prosecution after a number of homeless people died following medical trials for a vaccine to the H5N1 bird flu virus. That's the one you're referring to, isn't it?
That is, and a little bit of research into the database and so on reveals that it appears, I should formulate myself very carefully, it appears that it was Novartis's drug that was the one that was being tested. And this drug is actually licensed, I believe, so it's actually got the okay from the authorities. And the other point is its primary outcome measure on the clinical trials database is adverse events reaction. And that has struck me as a little bit odd when I saw that. You would think it would be positive events reaction, but it's actually the primary outcome measure is adverse events reaction.
Jane, I'm going to have to cut in there because we're going to go for our first break now. If you'd like to text in your questions or comments for Jane Burgermeister, Amanda Blake and Paul Byrne, please do so now to 87778 with the word EDGE and then your text. See you back here again on this exciting subject very soon. Welcome back to On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers, and my special guest on the line from Austria, Jane Burgermeister, and in the studio, Amanda Blake and Paul Byrne. We're talking about vaccines and viruses that could be designed for purposes other than those we have been told about. Jane, if I can get back to you for a minute. The internet is awash with stories about FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency in America, and the fact that they seem to have built tens, if not hundreds, of detention camps across America, and that there are plastic coffins stacked up in the desert. What do you know about this?
Well, I've also seen that kind of evidence, and to me, being here in Austria, it rings true. I mean, I'm well aware of the history of Nazi Germany. The FEMA camps seem to be very similar to the concentration camps that were in place in Nazi Germany. The railway cars, the coffins, the mass grave sites. This is all very familiar to me. Unfortunately, also familiar to me is the media silence on these events. Under Nazi Germany, the media was also controlled and filtered, and it did not tell people about the concentration camps, the mass arrests, and this kind of information. It sort of it was a taboo in the newspapers in Nazi Germany, and a lot of the population really was not confronted with it, at least in the media. And it seems to me the same case in the USA today, that the mainstream media doesn't even look at these issues or conduct a serious investigation. They're either silenced, as treated with ignored, or they're referred to as conspiracy theories.
Okay. What about in the UK then, Amanda?
Oh, there's buildings designated already for the bodies. They went round in like 2000, 2001, and there's big abandoned buildings they're planning to fill with the dead bodies, and then they will just raise the building to the ground.
Okay, let's go to some texts here.
I was looking at the UK pandemic plan, and there is indeed a little section where they talk about management of mass casualties and civil unrest and the role of the police and the armed forces. And that is explicitly mentioned in the pandemic plan, the management of mass casualties.
There was an article in the Daily Mail about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, where the authorities are calling on crematoriums to be prepared to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, to cope with the casualties from what at the moment is a flu that's killed, 400 people in the whole world.
And compared to the seasonal flu, that kills 100,000 people a year, doesn't it? Or more, I believe. I mean, I'm not sure of this, but it's that sort of area, isn't it?
In around those numbers, yeah.
And so for this swine flu, and the bit weird thing is no one seems to have been near any pigs to have caught it. So
exactly.
What's the... this has been analysed, this swine flu, hasn't it? What's the story on what it's made of?
Well, I mean, I'm not too sure exactly what it's made of. I mean, I'm not a doctor or a biologist or geneticist, but I do know, as I said to you earlier on, that it's been found to be an exact genetic match of the 1918 so-called Spanish flu.
Isn't that mixed with something else, though, like a swine flu or a bird flu or...
I'm not sure. Sorry, I see what I know what you're getting at now. The swine flu is apparently a mix of components from pigs, birds, and humans from different parts of the world, from different continents. I mean, the mechanics of that actually happening are impossible, as you could imagine. I mean, it seems to be a genetic mishmash of different flu strains.
Well,
and that can't happen in the wild.
Well, also, weren't there some patents, Jane? Weren't there some patents taken out on this swine flu before it became evident, even, and also on the vaccine for it? Am I correct in this?
Indeed. I mean, it's a big mystery about this swine flu, but Baxter did file a patent in 2008 for the H1N1 virus, which is the swine flu. So it's a mystery how they can declare this is so new and so deadly that we don't have any immunity against it, and we all have to have this mass vaccination, when Baxter already had the patent for it filed in 2008.
So are you suggesting then that they deliberately weaponised flu